As we continue our discussion, let's now look at membrane potentials. Membrane potentials result from the separation of charge that develops immediately adjacent to the membrane because of the constitutive properties of that cell membrane. We've mentioned in previous lectures the presence of potassium leak channels, and it's these channels that have the greatest impact on establishing our resting membrane potential. We also have our sodium-potassium pump that plays a primary role in creating the various gradients associated with these ions. The separation of charge that's created is called the membrane potential. It's called the membrane potential because the separation of charge that's occurring is immediately adjacent to the cell membrane. There is potential energy as a result of the separation of charge across the membrane. It's important to understand, however, that the membrane potential is a very localized phenomenon, existing only within nanometers within the membrane surface. If we were to check the voltage of the cell's interior, we'd find that the cell's interior is actually electrically neutral. But the membrane potential does indeed reflect the slight separation of charge that occurs very locally around the cell membrane. The membrane potential is an infinitesimally small charge imbalance that develops within nanometers of the cell membrane because of ions primarily moving through potassium leak channels. Only about 1 in 100,000 to 1 in a million ions move across the membrane to create the membrane potential. Recall the Nernst equation is a way that we can calculate the equilibrium potential, and this was something that was only relative to one particular ion. The membrane potential can be calculated using a formula called the Goldman-Hodgkins-Katz equation. Here I'm providing you with a very simplified version of that equation, but as we've discussed previously, since we won't be calculating any numbers, I want to give you more of a conceptual version of this equation, which I'd simplified to this. What this represents is P sub K stands for the relative permeability of the membrane to potassium times the equilibrium potential potassium, plus the relative permeability of sodium times the equilibrium potential of sodium. Understand that other ions will contribute to the membrane potential, however they contribute minimally, so they're left out of this conceptually simplified version of the equation. The selectively permeable nature of the cell membrane conferred by the leak channels is such that potassium and sodium are the dominant ions impacting the resting membrane potential. The GHK equation takes into consideration the equilibrium potential of each ion, as well as the relative membrane permeability to each ion. This formula essentially provides a weighted average of the equilibrium potential of all the ions to which the membrane is permeable. Once again, we are focusing primarily on the effects of sodium-potassium as the dominant ions. Recall that cell membranes constitutively have an abundance of potassium leak channels. As a result, our cell membranes have a very high permeability to potassium, allowing potassium to flow out of the cell. Let's take a situation in which a membrane had only potassium leak channels, such that the relative permeability to potassium was 1 and the relative permeability to sodium was 0. Then the resting membrane potential would be equal to potassium's equilibrium potential of negative 92.6. The fact that many of the cells which we'll be looking at have a resting membrane potential of negative 70 millivolts indicates that the membrane also has some sodium leak channels as well. In this particular figure, we're going to revisit the equilibrium potential for potassium and sodium. Here we have a cell that's at potassium's equilibrium potential of negative 92 millivolts. Potassium is more concentrated inside the cell than outside, so I've drawn an arrow indicating the direction and representing the magnitude of the chemical gradient. Because the inside of the cell is negative, the direction of our electrical gradient will be inward. And since the cell is at the equilibrium potential for potassium, I've drawn these two arrows to be equal and opposite. Here again, the electrochemical gradient will be 0. Below, we have a cell that's at sodium's equilibrium potential. So we have the positive 60 noted inside of the cell. We know that sodium is more concentrated outside the cell than inside the cell, so the chemical arrow will be directed inward. And in this situation, because the inside of the cell is positive and sodium is positive, the electrical gradient in this particular setting for sodium will be directed outward. Because this is at sodium's equilibrium potential, the magnitude of the arrow will be exactly the same but opposite of the chemical gradient. Here again, the electrochemical gradient will be 0. Let's now move to a cell that's not at either one of these ions' equilibrium potential, but that's at our more standard resting membrane potential of minus 70 millivolts. So in considering how potassium would act in this setting, realize that our chemical gradient for potassium is still going to be directed out of the cell. And because the concentration of potassium inside and outside the cell are standardized, then the magnitude of this arrow will be the same as what we saw previously. In this setting, the direction of the electrical gradient will be directed inward because potassium is positive and the inside of the cell is negative. But notice how I've drawn the size of this arrow smaller than what we had previously. This arrow represents a magnitude of negative 92, and that would exactly oppose the chemical gradient. This arrow only represents a magnitude of minus 70, which means our electrical gradient is smaller than our chemical gradient. So in this setting, our electrochemical gradient would be directed out of the cell. Let's take the same cell and have sodium present. Once again, sodium at its baseline concentration is more concentrated outside the cell than inside, so the direction of our chemical arrow will be the same as we saw previously, and it will be directed inward. In this case, the inside of the cell is negative, and sodium is a cation. So the direction of the electrical arrow will also be directed inward at a force of 70. So in this case, we're going to take the net effect of the electrical and chemical gradients, and this will give us a very large electrochemical gradient directed inward. Understanding these two forces will help us understand which direction sodium and potassium will move if there are channels that open in the membrane that allow for their movement. In this case, if we had a potassium channel that was open, then based on the electrochemical gradient acting on potassium at negative 70 millivolts, potassium would be moving out of the cell. We can actually calculate the driving force for potassium by taking the resting membrane potential of the cell and subtracting the equilibrium potential for the ion. So in this case, it would be negative 70 minus a negative 92, so the driving force for potassium would be positive 22 millivolts. In the case of sodium, if we had a sodium channel open in this cell, and we see that the driving force for sodium is directed inward, then sodium would move into the cell. The driving force for sodium would be a negative 70 minus 60, which would give us a driving force of a negative 130 millivolts. So this negative driving force indicates that it's driving the ion into the cell. A positive driving force indicates that it's pushing the ion out of the cell. It's not surprising, based on the way that we diagram these arrows here, that the driving force for sodium is much greater into the cell than the driving force for potassium out of the cell.